Well, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. It's 4 o'clock. It's the end of the afternoon. Glad to see you gathering. We've got a great session ahead of us. This afternoon, we're going to be thinking about net zero buildings and infrastructure. How do we get things going? How do we innovate to scale? And what are the solutions, the processes, the approaches that we can deploy to do that together? The built environment is responsible for a significant proportion of global emissions. The property sector up to 20%. In other terms, thinking of energy use, the International Energy Agency puts it at 30% of global energy consumption into the built environment. The change to that is challenging. Globally, deep decarbonisation is estimated to need $600 billion annually from now to 2050. Our markets are disaggregated, not delivering at the extent or the speed at which we need them to. End users are often uninformed and under-incentivized. So the solution to a systemic problem must lie in systemic solutions. We're looking for holistic approaches. Certainly, today we'll have a chance to talk about novel and innovative solutions. But I'd like us to be able to look also to holistic and widespread shifts in practices and processes. Together, if we have solutions, if we have processes, we have practices, then we have the setting for systemic change. So this session will highlight some of the first movers. We'll look at some particular innovations, both at the solution level and then also in terms of practices and processes. We have a great panel with a broad range of experience. And as we come together, we're going to be thinking about not only the experience and the examples they bring, but also how they help us to shape collaboration, supply chains and skills. So hopefully we can leave here in 50 minutes' time with some encouragement, perhaps some inspiration, certainly with some energy to do what we can individually and as organisations to help play our part in scaling innovative approaches to net zero buildings and infrastructure. Now, you're sitting out there staring at us wearing these headsets. We are going to come to you shortly, so please do think of questions as we go. There will be plenty of opportunity towards the end. After about 20 minutes of question and answers, we'll have a break for your questions from the floor. So keep them in mind as we go through today. Let me give a brief intro to the panel, and then they will explain a little bit more about their personal experiences as we go through the session. So very pleased to welcome Richard Ellis, Director of Sustainability at Peabody, Joe Parker-Swift, CEO of Solvius, Zainab Dagna, Head of Sustainability Technology Services at Waits Group, Gerald Manton, the founder of GNM Developments, and at the end, Laura Jockers, very pleased to have you, Laura, Global Head of ESG, M&G Investments. Okay, let's get going. We're going to start with a question here around this idea of innovation. The status quo is not sustainable. We can't carry on as we have done. Building nothing is not an option. So we need some net zero solutions, both, as we said, the technologies, but also those processes and approaches. And so I'd like to start by asking Richard, and then Gerald, and then Joe, for your thoughts on and reflections on what innovative processes or practices have you been involved with that are required to drive change, both at pace and at scale, and how do we do this to address the real needs of occupiers and users?
Thank you, and hello everyone. I suppose the first thing, Peabody owns a lot of property. We own 109,000 homes. So the first bit of innovation that we need to do is actually around data, making sure that we are prioritizing the right things at the right time. So we use a lot of complex systems to do that, hoovering up data, working out through aggregated energy demand plus our asset data where we need to go first. We've also looked at a system called Kestrix, which is flying drones over houses to see whether or not we can actually take that information straight away on the doorstep, as it were, without going into a resident's home, and then triangulating that data so that we're spending our money as wisely as we can. But the other thing that we look at quite carefully, other than, I mean, you have technologies, you have batteries, you have solar, we've got air source heat pump combis coming in the next couple of years, but the other thing that we're really looking at really closely is how are we building? Are we building the right thing in the right place? Are tower blocks a thing? Probably not, I would say. They're getting more complex. They're very carbon intensive. Actually, should we be going back? I know that's not really innovation, but should we be going back to how we were building and how it's built in the continent? 6 stories, you can start reducing down your embodied carbon. You can start looking at more flexible and more interesting designs at that level. And it's more human scale, which means that we would spend less, we repair less, we reduce our carbon. So those are a few things I'd look at. And then the only other one I would mention is that other than the technology, and people think innovation, think technology, we need financial solutions and financial products that allow us to recoup some of our investment. Our average rent is £137 a week. We have to do everything out of that. So if we invest £30,000 in EWI on a property, we're not getting that back. The resident's getting a great deal out of it, and that is brilliant, but we're not being helped by that. So is there a way that we can share the benefit of it so that it enables us to do more and actually to decouple from the government's schemes so that actually we can plan things in a more effective way?
Thanks, Richard. So a very interesting starting point, data and understanding performance better, but then also thinking not just to layer on then more technology, more solutions, but somehow simplifying or making better use of what you have, and then indeed trying to understand how to capture the benefits effectively, and that being challenging at the moment. Gerald, to you, capturing benefits. Tell us a bit more about your experience in Birmingham of a challenging site.
Well, I'm going to agree there, Richard. Tall buildings are very challenging to do. And I've got a 29-storey property that I'm bringing through the planning at the moment, which we hope will be the world's tallest energy-positive building, using a building integrated photovoltaic system. The innovations, I think, from a developer's perspective, comes from sort of outlining that brief at the start, and how do you go about giving that brief to your architect? What's the orientation of the building? What size of the windows? How do we maximise the on-site energy generation potential? And it's been a real difficult thing to bring forward. Also bringing along a design team as well, that you can get to believe in what you're doing. That's been quite a tricky thing. And going on to what Richard also picked up on as well, the finance of it at the end, because it being a non-traditional building, it's difficult to fit it into a model that works anywhere. So we do need a bit of more innovation in the way the financial models work, so that they can appreciate the value that we're bringing with these sort of buildings. Because at the moment, I don't think that appreciation is there for them. And ultimately, then going on to the tenants that use them, living in a building, I think living in a building that you know is giving back more than it takes, it is a selling point to the tenants for me. And the feedback that we've had, particularly from the younger population who are going to be using these, it's a co-living scheme, so it's going to be from 18 to 35, is that they would choose that over, if it was the same building and one was positive and one wasn't, they'd choose the positive building.
Gerald, thank you. So that's energy positive building on a site that had been difficult to make work, but through your solution, you've been able to generate energy more than is needed on site and make it a viable proposition. Joe, tell us a bit more then about how technology and innovation can help unlock challenging sites or new business opportunities.
Thanks very much, Chris. Yeah, at Solivus, we specialise in lightweight solar technologies. We've got a stand outside if anyone's got, would like to know more, and you come talk to us afterwards. But we specialise in buildings, actually, just like the one we're in now. 40% of large commercial buildings are unable to take the weight of conventional solar. So sometimes you'll see these massive buildings on the motorways and you'll be wondering why they don't have solar on them. It's due to weight and windage issues. So we specialise in these sorts of buildings. And where I come from in your question is about using lots of different innovations to get what customers want. And what customers ultimately want is to save money and to decarbonise their buildings. And also with everything that's going on in the world, they also want energy security. So we want to put maximum solar on these huge buildings and make sure that our customers can achieve those three things. Problem is, lots of buildings like this, they actually generate too much energy on the top for the demand inside the building. So even with huge factories and things, and they've got robots and all sorts of stuff going on inside, they still don't use all the energy that the solar can make on the roof. But by combining with other technologies, sometimes batteries, and what's coming into the fore when we got a press release tomorrow, because we're going to be starting to collaborate across multiple property portfolios with a company called Urban Chain that can trade energy. So what we can do is we can look at a whole property portfolio, and the bigger buildings that have this huge surplus, they actually will be able to trade energy from one of their buildings to another one of their buildings at a low cost, saving money, decarbonising their estate and securing their energy supply. So joining, thinking outside the box and all the different innovations and how you can make this work.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Yeah. Bringing together different innovations in a new way, and I particularly like that angle there on how you can then bring together adjacent occupiers, different businesses locally, and understand how they could use the energy that's been generated, how they could decarbonise themselves through that. Zainab, we're going to come next to a question about supply chains and working with others and understanding the needs of others in the supply chain, how they can help you, how you can help them, and so forth. Tell us a little bit more about bringing together stakeholders and partners for this purpose of innovation for net zero. How do we get to the point where we're working collaboratively and not just trying to sell technological solutions? And then tell us a little bit more about your experience. Has it worked well? Has it been easy? And what lessons have you learned along the way?
So that's sort of what I do for my day job, and I head the WAIT Sustainable Technology Services, which is an initiative to bridge the gap between suppliers that have got innovative products and end users, whether it's clients, project teams, or building users looking to decarbonize their buildings. What we've realized with time is that all our clients are desperately looking for products or solutions to help them accelerate their journey to net zero, but they consider the task of selecting that right product as a complex decision-making problem. The reason is that there's so many products out there, they're not sure which products work, which ones are credible, and also within their teams, they've got multiple stakeholders, and they consider it as a complex decision-making problem, and they're not able to get past that decision-making process. So what I try to do is to get the right sort of key, stakeholders involved, because everybody's important, right from the client, the project team, the technical lead, the facility managers as well. So we've worked very closely with a leading bank, and the only way we could make it work was to make sure that we were engaging with the right people. So we had the FM team involved, we had the supply chain, the M&E consultants, and they were involved in selecting the right product because they were all looking at it from a different angle. And we launched a campaign, over 100 suppliers applied, and the bank then invested in 4 technologies. And because we had the right stakeholders around, they then trial some of the technologies. Some worked, some didn't work, but those that worked have now been rolled out. And yeah, so I think for me, it's about really getting the right stakeholders and making sure everybody's on board and taking them on the journey along.
Just if I come back to you on that point there, did you think was there enough time given to prove the innovations, or how did you balance the kind of the competing desires from investors perhaps to see quick returns and see things work now, and inevitably, as you say, some innovation is going to require a bit of trial and error and refinement along the way. Can you describe any more of that process?
Yes, so from my experience, because over the years we've got 115 innovation partners, and they range from simple retrofit products like tabletop to building materials to optimization analytical tools to general sustainable products. We've had more success with products that are retrofit that a client can easily put on, and if it doesn't work, they remove it, versus a building material. There's a lot of risk associated with that, so a lot of clients are reluctant to sort of go near anything that is more building material or is going to go into it. But in terms of the trial, most of the products we have, because they're retrofit, they are quick wins with a payback of less than 2 years. And our clients have actually trialed it on a smaller side just to sort of see whether they do work. And based upon the success, they then roll it out. And that's difficult with building materials. So again, more M&E related products have been more successful.
Great, thank you. Laura, can I bring you in on this one? Innovation and stakeholders and risk, and tell us a little bit more from your experience from an investor perspective and managing large portfolios of investment. How have you been dealing with trying to push boundaries but also manage risk around that?
Yeah, sure. So M&G Real Estate, we manage over 8,000 properties globally of multiple sectors, everything from residential to logistics and commercial, everything in between. So quite a challenging portfolio, different geographies and sectors, as I said, to deal with. But also a really complex ecosystem of stakeholders. So a lot of outsourced asset management, outsourced property management, outsourced development. So it's challenging to push the boundaries. But the thing, there's two aspects I think that I lean on. It's trying to incorporate ESG and performance standards within everybody's role, either internally and externally. So, for example, we have our own development standard that we apply across all our properties and development projects globally. And then the second thing I think is, in order to sort of scale up or make meaningful change, we have to move away from a focus on success being about ambition, but actually what we're delivering. So that focus on the sort of performance once the building is built, and that does require closer collaboration. So I think the two things I've seen in the last few years are closer collaboration internally. It's no longer ESG plus all the other functions. ESG is embedded into property investment committee papers, asset management plans. As soon as we acquire a building, we've got a 100-day asset management plan that factors in all the capex that needs to decarbonise that building. It also factors into our sale programmes. So there's integration at a much closer level between ESG and all the functions internally. And as I was saying, externally, so the example I was going to bring is around, we have a building that's recently completed, 40 Leadenhall, and it's 5-star neighbours rating, which is a design and performance standard. So that has required everyone from the outset, so designers, engineers, incoming occupants and developers, to be aligned with what the performance outcomes need to be for that building right from the start. And you can't innovate after the fact, a bit like Gerald was saying, that you can't, if it's after brief, after contract, that innovation opportunity is lost. So what we found is that design for performance focus is crucial in getting everybody on the same page right from the outset.
Yeah, and that being, as you say, from the outset, so really early on, maximum opportunity for change, for carbon reduction, decarbonisation, comes from thinking right at the beginning, and rather than post hoc trying to make the changes. Thank you very much. Let's move on a little bit more. We've talked. In fact, we just picked up a little bit on that theme of measurement and trying to understand performance in practice, and that comparing perhaps back against design. But let's talk a little bit about technology specifically. And the question is, how does technology enable us to focus our effort and resources? Now, right at the very beginning, Richard, you said about collecting data and maybe doing that remotely and analysing. But the question really here for Joe and then Zainab and Gerald, how do we use technology to focus our efforts, maybe reduce the resources needed to deliver long-term and sustained carbon reductions? Joe.
Yeah, thanks. So actually, this ties in a bit with what Laura was just saying slightly, because we work with a lot of innovative organisations. At the moment, Tesco is one of those companies that are really innovative, and they're really looking ahead at how to get to net zero with innovation. And if a company is embracing innovation and planning ahead, like you're saying, and looking at the design stage, things like that, it can really help. And so the longer term, an example of another project which is innovation and looking long term. I mean, ultimately, our solar lasts for 25 years is the warranty. It'll go on for 35 years anyway. So that's quite a nice long-term solution. Getting the embedded carbon in buildings from the offset in the design phase, as you just said, is really important. And so we are looking to work with companies, and I was chatting with Gerald before the session, looking to work with companies that, like, all big buildings like this are going to need to have solar in the future. But let's work at the design phase. Let's, as your question says, see how this innovation can reduce carbon, reduce the steel, reduce the concrete needed, and by those reductions in itself, it adds a massive reduction in the CO2 for the actual building, and then you're talking about the actual embedded carbon within the building. And I do believe we should be looking at embedded carbon within these solutions as well. So, for example, our technology doesn't have any glass and it doesn't have any metal, so it automatically has a lower embedded carbon footprint. So as we're measuring and we provide reporting for our customers in kilograms of carbon saved, things like that. So as we're doing the reporting, does it include embedded carbon? Is it a true reflection of what the innovation is doing, what the solution is doing? And so yeah, I think that's it. Planning, get the embedded carbon in there as much as we can with all the projects and products and solutions and the buildings, and let's measure it and report it in an accurate way.
Thank you, Joe. Zainab, we'll come back to you in a moment on metrics. Just on that point around balance of the whole life carbon and the upfront embodied against the operational savings. Gerald, tell us a bit about your project and how you considered that.
Yeah, so obviously the building itself was on a really awkward site. It was 106 metres long by 8.5 metres wide, which when you're going to do a tall building, you wouldn't normally look at that kind of sort of site. What that led to was a horrific water-floor ratio, so it was a really negative thing. But then if you apply solar to those walls, it becomes a positive thing because we've got that much external wall that it becomes energy positive. You could just put that much, and it's not just solar panels, they're building integrated photovoltaic, so it's generating solar, it's protecting the building from the rain. But then when you sort of start off and you realise that we could develop a building that was energy positive, we then had to go right back to the start. The existing building on site, what do we do with that? What do we do with the materials? Because the entire thing becomes a sustainable project. It's not just about producing a building in the future that is going to be sustainable. It's about what do we do with the materials that are on site now. So there's a 4-storey building which will be deconstructed, and those materials will be used as the bricks will be reclaimed bricks, The steelwork, the wood, the timber inside will be used to make the new furniture for the new building. That technology has led to the whole process of how we develop and deliver that project to be thought about from the start, not just knock a building down. How do we reuse those materials? That's the ethos you've got to have. You can't say we want to develop an energy positive building without now going all the way to the start and go, well, how do we make sure it's sustainable as it can be? And that includes reducing the embedded carbon, looking at the materials that we use. If they're new materials, how do we ensure that they've got a reduced embedded carbon in them as well? And so, yeah, that's how, in this project, the technology has fed how we're actually going to develop the site along the way.
So you're starting with some quite traditional development metrics, water floor ratios and things, moving into sort of sustainability metrics, but that actually driving the way the whole sustainability brief is formed, or shaping the way you're approaching the whole project.
That became the brief to everyone on the project. The whole design team, it was, we're going to do this. This is how it's going to play out, and it was met with a lot of scepticism at first that they wouldn't be able to do this until we, as a design team, we proved that it will work. And then it's okay. So in reality, we have a building that generates a massive excess of electricity in the summer and has a deficit in the winter. So things like having to create a microgrid with our neighbours so as we can shed that power to someone else. Luckily, we're in the middle of a city, so our neighbours are sort of 10 metres away from our site, so we can have a dedicated line. So it's what do we do with that excess electricity? If it was out in the middle of nowhere, like on an industrial park, I don't think we could make that sort of thing work without using the grid as a mechanism to get that to other people. But it's that one element in particular, that the microgrid we created, that the neighbours have loved that, because we can sell them electricity at half the price they pay from the grid. We get about 7 times more than we would if we put it back into the grid. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Great, thank you. Zainab, let me come back to this question about demonstrating whether or not we're meeting our net zero objectives. How have you used data and metrics with your on your innovation platform to help demonstrate the benefits that are being brought?
Yeah, so you can't manage what you can't measure, so it's very important that the technologies are able to prove what they can do, whether it's water saving, energy saving, carbon saving. So we need to sort of have a clear, a baseline to understand how the building is performing, and then as a business, it would probably be easier if I sort of give an example using weights as a business. So in 2019, we established our baseline, and in 2020 we announced our 2025 goals, where we said we're going to achieve net zero in scope 1 and 2, and also reduce the waste on our sites. And in 2022, we published our weights near science-based targets under the SBTi. And what we did is that we committed, and we have developed and created an emission reduction target. And we have also communicated that and disclosed that to our stakeholders. And by 2025, we hope to be carbon neutral in scope 1 and 2. And by 2027, we hope that 89% of our suppliers would have got an approved science-based target as well. And by 2030, we hope to achieve absolute 46.2% reduction in scope 1 and 2. And we hope to be net zero by 2045. So we have got a baseline, and we're working towards it, and we're on track.
Thank you, Zainab. And it's interesting to hear that part of your journey as an organisation is engaging them with your supply chain and then setting a target around that engagement, and and that's again something you can measure as you track your own progress as a business towards your net zero targets.
Yes, and I think for a lot of organizations, scope 1 and 2 is just about 10% of their total emissions, and 90% emissions are going to be from scope 3. So there's going to be a lot of focus on how companies can help their supply chain reduce their emissions and work towards their science-based targets as well.
Absolutely. So we've thought so far about the process of innovation. What there is, that there are solutions that are coming to market. There are things that can be done. There are different ways of dealing with it. Perhaps it's a simplification. Perhaps it's rolling back on some of the things that we have embedded in our processes. Certainly, there's a clear case for measuring and for data, for collaboration and working with supply chains. But all that said, and many of us here will be at this event will be here because we're passionate about it and we're interested to work for companies that are similarly on board setting science-based targets and so forth. But there's still a long way to go. So let's try and finish up this part of the session as we think a little bit about scaling. What are the barriers to making real change? We've got some ideas of some of the enabling conditions, some of the tools that we need to use, but what are the barriers? And so as we take a longer-term view, a longer-term approach, and that's maybe to carbon reduction in the assets you manage or those that you develop, talk to us, Laura and Richard, to you two. What are some of the keys to thinking long-term, and what are some of the barriers that we're seeking to overcome? And in particular, Laura, for you on financing and bringing things, bringing things forward.
Yeah, thanks. So we're long-term investment managers. The sort of key thing, we represent the underlying investors. So we're looking at protecting value, de-risking portfolios. So some of the challenges around that are the boring things. We've talked about technology. I don't think net zero, I think most people in the panel would agree that net zero is not a technical challenge anymore. It's a leadership or alignment challenge. Finance, people, regulation, governance has to be aligned around clear outcomes in order to scale up. We don't have that state of play, I don't think, in any geography, and it's actually probably, if anything, threatened because of what's happening in the US at the moment. So that can be an undermining force and a barrier to internal change and collaboration. We're not seeing that in our investor base at the moment, but when I speak to other peers, they are feeling that. So, that adds noise to basically what's fundamentally the same issue. We need to de-risk and protect value for our clients, and that means trying to predict what the future climate is going to look like. Are any of our assets going to be exposed to flooding, heat stress, whatever the perils might be in that future scenario, but also this decarbonisation journey. Some of the challenges around that are being solved by technology, so we're using data and technology to automate a lot of the noise, so it frees up more time for ESG people to work with asset managers, property managers, to give insight rather than just reporting and checkbox type disclosures. But in order to really understand how a building's performing, you need to have good knowledge about that building, and that requires consent from the tenants. And that is across a global portfolio with probably close to 1 million tenants. That's a monumental challenge. And even when we talk about data sharing in soft green leases, there's many tenants that are willing to share the data, but there's an equal number who are just, the trust still isn't there. And I think that's where frameworks can be an enabler, building that transparency and understanding of why the data's needed. It's not to chastise tenants, it's to actually understand what we can do collaboratively to improve the underlying performance, reduce emissions, and collectively get there as an industry.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that aspect of engaging with tenants and tenants being key to long-term change is a really interesting one. And perhaps, Richard, something that you might pick up as you tell us a little bit more about how your view of the long-term change comes together at Peabody, where you're a very historic organisation and you've got a long-term view.
Yeah, hi. So I think I said before, I'm contractually obliged to. We're 163 years old. We plan to be around for another 100 years, giving homes to people. But actually, it's pretty much exactly as you said. We are looking at risk. We are looking at how we can maintain our buildings. We are looking at how best and when to intervene into something. And you have tenants, we have residents, and we have actually pretty much exactly the same problems that you're having, just on a social housing scale. So what we try to do is work with our residents to let them understand what is going to happen. There is a lack of trust, huge lack of trust around the organisation, around the sector. People aren't talking to us, and to try and go into somebody's home and say, right, I'm going to put in a heat pump, I'm going to increase the level of insulation, I'm going to put a monitor in that says actually the temperature goes up and goes down with the weather, is a really big ask for a lot of people. Which is why I go back to sort of making sure that you've got the right data to know exactly where you need to focus your energy. And I don't think that the more we look at it, the more we think actually fabric first is probably not the right way to go. It's a lot of embodied carbon. There's a marginal reduction in the, that's not the right word. The more insulation you put in, the less benefit you get marginally. So we're looking and seeing actually where can we get to with traditional things that people understand, and then how can we put in things which are fit and forget or are simple and intuitive, so that residents don't have to particularly change. It just does enough. Because not only have we got to decarbonise, the world is changing. It is getting hotter. Downpours are getting heavier. So we're going to have to transition pretty quickly from decarbonisation to adaptation. And that's going to be much more difficult to deal with if you do it in the right way. If you did it after a flood, people would go, yeah, and people would be upset and you'll get things done right quickly. But actually to do something that's happening incrementally and slowly and bring people on board is going to be a real challenge. But that's what we are looking to do. So we're assessing all of our buildings around climate risk. We're looking on decarbonisation plans. We're matching that with planned investment programs to see what the best way of doing something is. And then we are working with finance, we are working with neighbourhoods, we're working with our residents to say, right, what's the best solution? We don't know. I mean, I can't tell you that there's going to be a giant flood in 2046, but the chances are something's going to happen at some point. So how do we build the trust so that actually when something happens, you know to call us, or we know to call you, and we can work together?
Thank you, Richard. So there we are. We've reached to a point for questions, and what we've covered off isn't so much about technology, although that has been key, but it has been about aligning interests, building trust, working with value chains in order to scale things and to bring much wider spread adoption to some of these solutions that we've heard about. We've got some time for questions, and so please do, if you have questions, raise a hand, and magically a microphone will appear. So I can see the microphone's coming this way. So why don't we start here on your on the
Hello,
aisle.
everyone.
Thanks. Go ahead, introduce yourself, and then give us your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sivan. Lovely to meet you. My question is perhaps more for Richard, Zainab, and Laura. And you just kind of touched upon it, but it would be great to understand what kind of progress have you even seen in the available tech data solutions supporting your net zero journey? And which tools have you seen or have you taken on board that you found very helpful versus what are some challenging areas that you still feel there is a need for solutions to come on board? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, great question. So where are we seeing advancement and technological solutions which are working well, and what areas of your work are sort of lacking? Richard, do you want to start?
I suppose where I see it working well actually generally is around monitoring and data. So being able to, for a heat network, making sure that heat network's running optimally. We've got smart meter data to make sure that we're squeezing as much out of the energy as we can. And then triangulation of asset performance data. Where I don't see it working quite well is a poorly designed heat network, or somebody who's put in a solution that's just the wrong one for that property and not explain it to a resident or not explained it to the occupant. It's very rarely actually the problem of the technology. It's more the use and the adoption of it.
Laura, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I'd only add really that similarly, monitoring is really helpful. Technology is enabling us to sort of track operational performance and optimize in real time on some buildings now, which is a fairly recent phenomenon really. But on the flip side, then you're faced with a volume of data that perhaps you didn't have several years ago, and making sense of that is a new challenge. I think the other challenge we've had with the proliferation of Internet of Technology and sort of prop tech solutions is who filters through all these new providers, which are the good ones, which are going to last, which are relevant in each country. As a global sort of investment manager, we're again looking for scalable solutions and ones that we can ideally roll out across different regions. But at the moment, it tends to be quite patchy, nuanced, very location-based, in many cases very building-specific. So that's adding a complexity to the role that didn't exist. We don't have a chief innovation or technology ESG lead within the business. Who helps us, play that role and filter through all these potential solutions.
Great, thank you. Let's move on for another question. Thank you. And then two at the front after that.
Good afternoon. My name is Sparsh. I'm a student and an intern at AXA Investment Managers. Thank you for bringing forward your insights over the last 50 or so minutes. I'd like to pick up on something that Richard mentioned or suggested earlier about 6-story buildings and going back to a type of building process that was from before and not so much about building vertically. How much of a challenge is that and other sustainability measures in the context of a housing shortage that the UK and much of Europe faces? I guess that question is for Richard and anyone else who may wish to answer that.
Okay. Since Grenfell, or even probably before that, taller buildings are getting more and more complicated. So you have building safety systems, you have heat networks, you have also common hold, which is about to come in. You've got it's having actually to look after high-rise buildings, very difficult to replace the windows. Very difficult. The scale that you have to work at is really difficult. Getting budget is really difficult, especially when you've got transitory budgets. So what ends up happening is that you never quite invest enough because you can never quite get enough money in that year to do the thing that you need to do. So what happens, it slowly degrades. But if you look at something at the whole life scale, and slightly lower, you actually can parcel that up. You can do the work much more easily. The whole life costing is actually reduced. So you can say that for square foot, actually building higher is better and I can get more homes onto it. But if that's losing money, I'm taking money away from being able to build somewhere else, or to be able to put a new kitchen in or a new bathroom in. We have to move away from just saying we're going to build that and we'll leave it alone for 30 years. We have to say, what's the whole life cost of it? What's the whole life benefit of it? What's the whole life carbon cost of it? And then we can start making some more rational decisions. Because you'll never get the carbon back. Well, apart from unless it's a very special building in a very special place, you're not going to get the carbon back from the amount of concrete you're going to put in there anyway. But I'm happy to talk to you more about it. It's very long and very boring, but I can do it.
Let's take a question at the front, and then one more down here. On this side, please. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Dean Cooper, I'm the Global Energy Lead for WWF. Very interested in what the panelists had to say in terms of rooftop solar. So that's an area that we've identified as being particularly interesting for energy provision, with having the least impact on natural resources. Obviously there's a land use issue, so if we can use solar on existing infrastructure, it makes a lot of sense for everybody. So I was very keen to understand The UK is in a bit of a leading position, having brought in this sort of regulation on new build must now incorporate some sort of rooftop solar system. So we're trying to understand which is the best approach for this. Should we be just looking at solar panels on top of the roofs, or is it rather integrated solar design, which I think, Gerald, you mentioned on that? And it really comes down to the cost effectiveness of it. So I welcome some advice on which sort of rooftop solar should we be pursuing. And I guess with Laura as well, is that something that M&G would invest in? So clearly with Joe, the product you've got, that's the first I've heard about it. Gerald with integrated side, Laura with the investment. Be very, very pleased to hear more from you on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really fascinating question. Thank you. So the answer for our technologies, because it's kind of like a material that you glue on with industrial adhesives, it is possible to put it on a roof before the roof goes on the building. We're retrofitting mainly at the moment because that is the challenge. Buildings that are large like this can't have solar on, so they're coming to us for solutions, and so we're retrofitting a lot of the time. But we would really welcome working with companies in the design phase, like how do we reduce the carbon, how do we reduce the steel and the concrete. We can help you. Let's look at the roof and get it integrated into the roof. And actually, regarding investment in M&G, thank you for asking that, because Solivus actually do have a patent for a new warehouse data center roof. This came about through looking at another product. It's called the Solivus Wave. It's an unusual shape. It's really wavy. It enables buildings to generate 60% more energy on their roofs than they could if the roof was flat and retrofitted with normal solar. So it's a really exciting product, and we are looking at investment to develop that. But we would have to develop it with a roofing company. They have to integrate it as they're building it, but it has all of the inverters, all of the necessary parts, all integrated in it. It has fire detection, fire suppression, cleaning. It's got everything in it, and so I do think that having these solutions not retrofitted, but actually having it in the building design, we have thought about that, and we have got a patent for that. But at the moment, we're doing a lot of retrofits.
Integrated photovoltaics into a building, I think is the way forward. The solar cells are so cheap now. And if I do a cost comparison against the traditional rain screen and the building integrated photovoltaic system, then it's about 20 to 25% more expensive to have the energy generating product on the walls than it is a standard rain screen. So it isn't a bolt-on product that's costing hundreds of pounds per square metre. It's not a new product put on the wall. It's integrated. I can't comment on the rooftop stuff because my roof just isn't big enough to have any of that. But there's lots of products that are coming out that have got the solar cells embedded into them. There's wooden products that are coming out. You can just cut them anywhere you like. Because they're so cheap now, and the technology behind the cells themselves have advanced that much that they be baked into everything, and I think we should do that. If you've got the opportunity to do it, you should. Now, looking at a normal building that hasn't got the horrific water-floor ratio that my narrow house has got, if I can make it pay back, and it's really only institutional investors that I think this applies to at the moment, but if I can make it pay back per square metre as an energy positive building, then any square metre of solar you put on any building will pay itself back. I think it's about 6-7 years it pays itself back. So it's not a massive cost. It's the long-term saving from the management save of the saving of electricity that creates the value on our buildings. So, but in terms of we should be using them everywhere. I find myself driving around looking at buildings that are going up and thinking, why haven't they put a solar cladding on there? Well, actually, it's Grenfell that meant that couldn't happen, and the technology's only just caught up with the regulations with regards to the fire approval of them. So we're just at the start of that wave, I think.
Joe, thank you very much. Let's just say Laura's going to invest in it. She's keen. We've got one more question and just a few minutes left, so let's have one more question and then we'll wrap up.
Hey, thank you. Regulations are driving. Sorry, can you hear me? Regulations are driving buildings to be net zero, but I don't think there's a general mandate for whole life carbon calculations and reporting. And even if there is, we know common sense says those emissions right at the beginning should be weighted more heavily, and they're not. Regulations aren't supporting upfront emissions, and yet, Christopher, you mentioned it, Richard, it was kind of the first thing you said, Joe, Gerald, you've all talked about the embodied carbon, but what's driving this? Because my understanding is it's not the regulations, we don't have Plan Z yet, so that there's no limits, there isn't even a mandate to report. So tell me why you're doing it anyway, or have I missed something?
Is anyone... Let me start answering, and then do you want to say something? So I think it depends a little bit on where you are. So some through local planning authorities, there will be some requirements to report whole life carbon, at least to undertake assessments. Certainly in London, I think there's broader industry agreement that this is something we should be doing, and so you can see the UK net zero carbon building standards as an example, and then sort of conceptually and theoretically, we know that, as you say, what we're emitting now is important to, when we're considering a global carbon budget. So I think there is an alignment, and not just amongst panelists in the sustainability conference, but more generally across industry, around the need to be clearer on seeing the upfront embodied emissions as well as the operational emissions. 10 or 15 years ago, it was less of a concern. Now, with a decarbonised grid, our recent ARAP analysis showed typically it's the whole life carbon emissions will be half and half embodied and operational emissions. So I guess it's becoming a much more sort of significant topic for us to address. Do you want to?
Yeah, so the GLA does require us to do whole life carbon, so we do that for our new developments now. But we also do full carbon reporting, which point we pick it up under our Scope 3. It is not great. It's as good as we can get it. But we acknowledge that the planet doesn't care if it's operational or embodied, it's still carbon. So whatever we can do to be a good actor is what we will want to do.
And I think for us in Waits, we're using the one-click LCA. So we are trying, and if there's any supplier, we try to ask if they've got an environmental product declaration. So that's becoming more and more sort of common. So EPDs are becoming a normal for us now.
And in terms of energy positive buildings, and just in the case of the Narrow House, we know that in 21 years' time, it would have saved that carbon that it's cost to build it. With the excess energy that we create and give to the neighbours, that difference is what's offset that embedded carbon, and also the fact that we've used the existing materials on site as part of the new build as well. So 21 years' time, that passes, what would it be, energy, carbon positive or carbon negative, or I'm not sure which one it is, but that's what we get. Carbon negative, it will be a carbon negative building, 21 years' time.
Okay, well, thank you all for staying with us right to the end. It's been lovely to hear from the panellists. Many thanks to each of you for sharing your thoughts on how we move towards net zero buildings, particularly at scale. We haven't talked an awful lot about net zero infrastructure. If you're here tomorrow, come along to a panel here on this stage at 2:00. How are leading businesses paving the way to lower emissions steel and concrete sourcing? You'll hear from one of my colleagues then. Otherwise, have a great evening, and we'll be here for a few minutes if you want questions.